Hello there. This is Julia Ellingbo, and we are doing Gaming as Other at Indie Plus. And I have two guests today, Ajit George and Strix Beltran. Hi, guys.
Hey, Julia.
Hi, Julia. How are you?
Pretty good. So today's show is going to be about going to GenCon because GenCon just ended, and I haven't been since 2008, so I'm looking forward to hearing how your report went. We were going to have one other person. We're hoping for Renee Knight, but she succumbed to con crud, so maybe another time. Definitely another time, because she had some really interesting perspectives on Gen Con. So just to give the little spiel, this event upholds the Indie Plus community standards. To find out more about those standards, Google for Indie Plus community standards. Please be aware that this event may include discussions about, and because I tend to have a potty mouth, explicit and or abusive language. I will do my best not to do that. So well, let's start with the good. What did you love about Gen Con? What worked? What were your favorite moments of Gen Con?
Gen Con is actually really fascinating because it's gaming in the real world, right? We often talk about theory and we talk about craft, but Gen Con is an explosion of everything all at once. It's gaming in the raw and the wild. And so it's a really diverse experience, actually. There are a lot of awesome things that happened, and there are a lot of not awesome things that happened. But one that I want to go to right away, actually, is sort of the community that Gen Con is. I'm on Twitter, and so are a lot of Gen Con attendees, but so are a lot of people of Indianapolis as a whole. Every time we go to a restaurant or any sort of service industry place, everyone says, "We love Gen Con, you guys are so nice." And I think actually we really proved that this last weekend. As you know, there was a lot going on in Ferguson, and there was a Mike Brown vigil that happened in one of the big squares downtown. And so a local Gen Con attendee sent out basically a tweet being like, "Hey, we would really love it if you Gen Conners came and showed solidarity." And I replied, and we showed up, which is, I think, really amazing. It was a very sad but very touching experience, and it was nice to be able to connect with people who lived in Indianapolis and part of the broader community. So while it was a really sad thing, I was really glad that I was there and we were able to participate, and it just kind of shows the backbone of what Gen Con is, which I thought was really awesome.
Yeah. I think it was a moment where it showed that gamers are aware of the larger world and the larger context around them, and they are tuned in. And it was nice to have some Gen Conners there showing that they have empathy and solidarity for a pretty volatile and vital issue that kind of cuts to the center of our country and our society. So that was a pretty powerful moment for me, actually. It was possibly the most powerful moment for me at Gen Con, was being at the vigil. So I was really glad to be there. In terms of other things that were really exciting, I think for me, Games on Demand was very positive experience. Games on Demand has been evolving over the years, and I think one of the great things that they've been doing this year and have been pushing over the last year, and I know this manifested in Origins as well, was a greater effort for diversity within Gen Con, within Games on Demand at Gen Con. And so I think there are some successes and some failures. The successes were a lot of the leadership in terms of hosting and organization was driven by women and people of color, some in the queer community, and I thought that was exciting and excellent and really progressive. It's a very safe atmosphere and a very progressive atmosphere, open to having these kind of conversations, very alert and aware of these conversations. Making sure the leadership is in a certain direction and has a larger social context and awareness of challenges there. So much so that that we look at even aspects of like the boarding procedures, for instance, those who need additional assistance when they are allowed to sign in earlier than the general con goer, and I thought that's very cognizant of difficulties and challenges that people who need additional assistance have. And I was very happy to see a lot of progressive efforts for Games on Demand. I think one of the challenges there, from my perspective, was we still do not have the penetration we need. Right, we're not reaching out to the communities as well as we can, these disenfranchised and minority communities, to bring them in. And I think there's good conversations to be had in the coming year as to how Games on Demand can do that. So that was another real positive for me. But the Games on Demand is a real small section of GenCon, so it only really touches a certain segment of the population, and I'd love to have that flow out to the rest of GenCon.
How many people go to Games on Demand compared to the rest of GenCon this year?
So GenCon was over 50,000 this year, and I think Games on Demand, I think it's well over 1,000, but I don't recall. I don't have the actual numbers. I think Jeremy is still working on those numbers, and so we don't have the specifics yet. And it's also difficult to see whether they're individuals or individual games, tickets being run. So, Strix, do you have a ballpark idea? Would you have a guess as to how many people you think were at Games on Demand? We were both there most of the con, so.
Yeah, I mean, I was hosting during peak hours, and we would see the whole room. It's really hard to say, but I want to say at least over 1,000 during the whole weekend. I don't have a head for these kinds of numbers, but I feel like we had some major traffic, and a lot of people heard about Games on Demand and were interested in playing as well, but just didn't know where it was. It moved locations this year, so that might have something to do with it as well. But yeah, working on the penetration, I think, is probably pretty key. Of course, we will need more staff, obviously, if it becomes any bigger.
Yeah, but I think what's great about Games on Demand is it's modeling good behavior, right? It's modeling the community and set of standards and expectations that we would love to see the larger gaming community take on. It is the atmosphere and attitude and comfort, safety that we would expect or hope for is the norm throughout the wider gaming community. I kind of wonder about dual penetration. So one would be getting more people of color, more queer gamers, more female gamers, so on and so forth, to come out for Games on Demand. Vice versa, can we bring those attitudes that are fostered and supported in Games on Demand to the larger gaming community once people come there and kind of see this and are part of that community, and it really does feel like Games on Demand is its own community? Will that branch outward to the rest of the gaming community? Those are really good questions and tough questions, and I don't have any answers for either one. I have some ideas as to how we might bring in more people of color and women, so on and so forth, to Games on Demand, but that's going to take some real effort and some real leadership, and we need more people on hand to make these things happen.
What were the, give me two great games, one each, that you both really loved?
We were working so much that we actually didn't get to play any games except for one.
Yeah.
But we did play one great game, Urban Shadows, and maybe Strix can speak to that.
Yeah, so we are actually both writing city guides for Urban Shadows. I'm writing the Los Angeles city guide, and Ajit is writing the Bangalore city guide. So it sort of behooves us to understand how the game works so that we can write about it. So we had Mark Diaz-Truman sit down and run a game for us along with several other people. And it was really interesting to see how Urban Shadows works. It has this really innocuous thing that seems like it wouldn't matter, but it actually matters quite a lot. And it's when you're making a character, it gives you choices for you to circle. So you can circle your name, but there is a variety of different kinds of names. You can circle your race, but white isn't listed first. And that turns out to be a really big deal, simply because people go, oh, I can be something else. And so we actually had a really rich diversity of characters at that game, more than I think I've ever seen in a single game anywhere ever before. I was playing this, Cuban oracle. There was someone playing like an ex-military social worker who was a black woman. Ajit, you can explain a little bit about who your character was, because that's just fascinating.
Yeah, I was playing a first-generation Indian American immigrant who had challenges within his family and was trying to struggle between his identity as an American and as an Indian and the family obligations. So, and his ties to the Syrian Orthodox Church. I don't think I've ever played a character like that before in my life, but it all came together in a quick game of like Urban Shadows, right?
Hmm.
So we had all these different, interesting, rich characters, and it was brilliant in that regard.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is, the game wasn't about that, right? Those were just extra added layers that contributed to the complexity and the texture of the play, which I actually really enjoyed.
Yeah, I felt it was part of us. It wasn't we weren't playing to the whole of it, but it did inform our decisions and choices and our actions, how we interact with each other, what our goals were, so on and so forth. So they were integral to who we were, but this entire story wasn't about us being people of color. We were people of color in a larger story, and our backgrounds impacted the choices we made within that story, and that was really smart, really great stuff.
Hmm. The other game that I really had my eye on but was not able to play was actually a game of Night Witches that was going on at Games on Demand. It was being run by Kira McGran, and Jason Morningstar is developing this game. It's really cool and really, really fascinating. I want to play it so bad. It's about female Russian bombers in World War II and sort of how they contributed to the war efforts, but also how they were being undercut by their own people and surviving these like crazy, crazy bomber missions. And it's very, very grounded in history. Like all the details are like real details. Like Jason Morningstar has been meticulous about this game, and I've only heard good things coming out of it because I've been following the development for some time now, several months at least. And it just sounds like a lot of fun. And so that one's definitely on my list to try. And if I had gotten a choice, I definitely would have played that game during Gen Con.
Yeah, I was excited to see also Steal Away Jordan was offered, and a game of that happened at Games on Demand too. Though I didn't get, we were working during the slots that it was playing, so we just did not get to get into the game. But I thought it was just there was just Games on Demand fosters and encourages diversity in games and the options and the offerings, and so that's really exciting, and it's something that's a larger conversation to be had as well. Whether we can emphasize that and give it give it some limelight, a little bit more attention, and see where that brings us. So yeah, Games on Demand was one of the most positive experiences for me.
Nice. All right, so we have a few more minutes. Let's talk about the bad and the ugly.
Oh my. I want to let you get started with the Nazi stuff, Ajit, because I think that should be talked about, if nothing else.
Yeah, sure. There's a vendor that comes out every year to Gen Con, or has been at least for the last few years. Last year they had a lot of Nazi paraphernalia available outside, like I think pretty dominantly displayed, if I recall, and along with very misogynistic items of clothing, shirts or thongs or various different articles of clothing that had remarks like, I like a little sexual harassment, maybe if you get me drunk enough, and stuff like that. You know, the phrases were very inappropriate and you know, just frustrating in the fact that Gen Con hadn't responded to this. I think they managed to eventually get the vendors to move that merchandise inside the booth rather than being openly displayed in public. But my guess is that Gen Con charges these vendors a high fee to be in the exhibit hall, and so they're profiting off of these vendors selling very offensive material. And this year, once again, it came up. There was Nazi pinup girl merchandise available inside the booth, this time hidden away, and anti-Japanese World War II propaganda posters, once again playing off of, I think, racial hatred and you know, a dark segment of American history, you know, not showing us in the most positive light, and like not modeling great behavior. I don't understand why Gen Con is allowing this, why this continues to be part of it.
Well, and I want to stop you here, and I want to really make the point clear. Like, there have been lots of complaints over the last couple of years about this specific vendor. It is harassing. I think legally, definition of harassing, and it has hate materials. And GenCon knows, right? GenCon has been in dialogue with these people who've been like, "This is not cool." GenCon has been like, "We'll take care of it." Well, I think this illustrates that GenCon actually really doesn't care, because I don't know what other conclusion I can come to other than that it's not important enough to the organization to have a safe space. And when people are really vocal about this, why they won't do something, that's pretty disturbing to me.
Yeah, it brings a question.
So I have a question about that. Oh,
sure.
go ahead.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so I have a question. So GenCon's a game convention. There are places where you can buy this stuff. You can, I think, sometimes get on eBay. If you ever go to a knife and gun show, I know I've seen it there when I lived in Tennessee, you could find lots of Nazi paraphernalia. Do you think there's a venue or a place for stuff like this that because sure, people are going to be interested in it, and you know that's their bag, but do you think there is a place to sell this stuff either at Gen Con or wherever? I mean, or should it be that you buy this at a knife and gun show?
I don't. My personal opinion, right, is that I don't really feel like it has a place at Gen Con. Gen Con is a gaming convention. You know, maybe if you're playing like Axis and Allies, like I get it, but there are many other ways that you can obtain this stuff. And you know, I hate to pull this card, but like there are families and there are children watching and walking these expo grounds. I do not really feel that this kind of stuff has a place in an environment where everyone is there to have fun, to participate in community. It's like it makes people feel bad. For very, very good reasons. So, I mean, feel free to disagree with me, but if I got to choose, right, I would be like, no, not allowed.
Yeah, I think it asks a larger question. What are we as a community? What is gaming about? The venues where you can usually find this stuff also run a certain course in terms of their demographic. It's often predominantly white. There are often racial tensions as an undercurrent. There's a lot of problematic stuff within the communities or areas that you can find this material, right? So it speaks to an audience that is tapped into a desire for very problematic or overtly racist, you know, just straight up overly racist merchandise or misogynistic merchandise, hateful merchandise, harassing merchandise. So it speaks to that community that seems to play into it. It ties into one another. Not always, but like I think that's often what it is. Gaming seems much more universal to me, or it should be, right? It's something that we all can do, want to do, should be able to do. Young, old, black, white, it should be for all of us. And so GenCon, which is the largest tabletop gaming convention, if it's not the oldest in America, it's certainly, you know, it's tied to D&D and Gary Gygax. I mean, it is, you know, one of the premier gaming conventions in the U.S., if not the world, sets the tone, right, about what gaming is, what it's about, what it should be about, what our community should be about. And if we certainly say that our community is also about hate speech, our community is about giving a platform for Nazi cosplay or sexist, misogynistic, hateful, you know, phrases. It's with a community that already has some problems with how women are treated within the community, or already has some problems about how you know, people of color are integrated in the community or where the positions are. This reinforces some really negative ideas, and I would really love to see Gen Con step away that, from the gaming community as a whole, to step away from that. You know, there are other avenues. I don't understand why you would want to have this stuff. I don't think it's, you know, I just think of it like the more that we say, the more we reinforce positive attitudes and really take to task negative points of view, the more that maybe as a community, as a people, that we'll become, you know, just better informed, more enlightened, more just hopefully more progressive.
That makes sense. I wonder if there's some sort of identity crisis going on then. So if you're going to allow this, and you are a game convention, and you're trying to get a lot of different people, and you're trying to get families to come and to have a good time, that maybe consider standards of what people can sell. I don't know. It's a larger conversation there, and we've only got like 2 minutes. So in those last 2 minutes, tell me, wrap up. Tell me what else you want to highlight and talk about.
Sure. So I think we're seeing tiny little bits of progress here as far as the con being more accepting and more welcoming to minority members, women, and people of color. Like, there's probably a little bit more this year than there was last year, but there is still leagues to go. I was sexually harassed off the top of my head like 3 or 4 times during the con. Nothing really like super major, but like not welcoming, right? And I'm sure that happened to many other women. I'm sure there are many other instances of people of minority status, queer or people of color, who are like, maybe I don't belong here. And I think we really have to concentrate and stay focused and work hard in order to gain ground. Because if we just go, it's getting better, we don't have to worry about it, we'll actually degress, right, instead of progress, and that's not what we want.
I want to stop you very quickly just to say that speaking of legal terms of sexual harassment or any kind of harassment, that it's always the perception of the person who's experiencing it and not of the person who's perpetrating it. So that is why I'm not going to ask you what happened. I'm just going to say you felt you were sexually harassed, and in a court of law, that would be enough, really. So.
I mean, it definitely was. I mean, I'll give you one example, probably the worst one. I was cosplaying as Alice on the expo floor, I think Friday or Saturday, and I saw basically a piece of kit, a leather harness and some stuff to go with it on display, and I was like, oh, that looks really interesting. The vendor very creepily like popped up behind me and was like, why don't you try it on? And I was like, I really can't. I'm wearing a corset. Obviously that means I have nothing underneath. And he made a very inappropriate innuendo about taking my clothes off. So.
Yeah, he was I was right there actually. It was kind of crazy to watch this unfold because he was invading her personal space from behind, and then fairly aggressively trying to convince her to take off her clothes, and he was asking it as if you thought this was a joke, but like it was very creepy and uncomfortable, and he wouldn't stop until we basically told him to stop, and then he backed off, and we left the booth. But it's something you would never see in a mall, right? Like you wouldn't go into a shop and like somebody would pop up behind you and be like, "Hey, take your clothes off. I would like try this on," and like be very persistent and insisting. So my question is, why is this okay at a gaming convention? Like, why are our standards of how we treat women and engage with women? Why is it dropped? Another instance was somebody cosplaying as a Nazi sat down at the table with the GM who was Jewish, and like the person pulled out the X card and said, like, this is not appropriate. You need to take off that swastika and put it away. Why is this behavior okay? Why would you go into these spaces and do these things? It is deeply offensive, very hurtful, and very problematic. And it isn't the community that I want to be part of. It isn't the community I think that many of us want to be part of.
And she did take it off, and
she did. She was a little confused, but she took it off, put it away. I think there was a moment for where the conversation could have gone further. Unfortunately, the GM at the time, I think he felt uncomfortable. It's often when you're a victim or you're on the other side of the coin. Like, it's hard enough to ask somebody to say, hey, this is really deeply offensive to me. Can you please not do this? Having that larger conversation is very challenging, very challenging. It's very hard to speak up for yourself, and it's very hard to find your voice and make yourself heard. So I think I don't know if he demurred or not, but I think he actually just probably was happy that you took it off and that there wasn't like a huge argument at the table. So, I think he took the small victory and ran with that.
It's always nice if someone's stepping on your foot, you tell them to get off your foot, and they get off.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
All right. So we went kind of overtime. Maybe we could do this again another time. Thanks, guys. Thanks for bearing with me. My first time being the host per se, and I hope everyone who's watching either live or on YouTube will tune in next month, and we'll talk about something else. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you, Julia.
All right, take care.
Bye, Julia.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.